I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this edition of Sit Down with Ed Brown. We got a special guest today, Mr. Derek Randles. How you doing today, Derek?
I'm doing fine. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Want to thank you for taking the time today to sit down with us and kind of go over some of your experiences and what you got going on.
Okay.
Now, let me ask you first. I generally start these things out by asking, what got you interested in the whole Bigfoot phenomenon in the first place?
Well, in 1985, myself and two other people were doing extensive hiking through the Olympic National Park. And on this particular day, we were getting up to the park a little bit late, and we got a start, and our hopes were to go about 8 or 9 miles up the staircase trail by Lake Cushman, and go up staircase trail and then hit some off trail for a while and possibly land on another trail. And we used to do a lot of overland, like pioneering with compasses back in that time frame, back in the 80s, before GPSs and everything. So we were up there on one of these particular occasions, and we're hiking up this trail. We get about 8 miles up. We got a little bit of a late start that day. And we got about to the 8 mile mark, and we left trail and started hiking up this ridge and looking for a place to, kind of a level spot on the ridge to camp. And we came to a spot, and we figured we were far enough off the trail that if any other backpackers were up there, our stuff would be safe, because we like to wake up in the mornings and explore around before we continue on and whatnot.
Sure.
So we got to this level bench, and we started. I actually used to carry a pair of pruning shears in my backpack, and I would shear off some hemlock boughs to put under my tent. And myself and Jim and Mike were just getting ready to put our tents down and unpacking our backpacks and whatnot. And we heard a crash, and the crash was quartered up to the left of us, just upridge a little bit. And I had thought at that moment that it was probably an elk, something of that nature.
Sure.
I wasn't into the Bigfoot subject at the time. I was aware of Bigfoot, or the thought of Bigfoot, but I really didn't even have an opinion on it. I hadn't seen anything at that point in my life to make me a Bigfoot researcher by any stretch.
Right.
And so as we're preparing our stuff, we hear this crash, and we look up, and we can't see where the noise came from. So we just started to kind of go back to what we were doing, and all of a sudden we hear this thud to the left of us, and it was a pretty resounding thud. And we looked over, and this rock was just coming to the final resting place. And we just like, what? What was that? And then all of a sudden, this rock came, arched through the air, and landed about 10 feet to the left of us. And at that point, we all just froze.
Hey, that'd be scary.
Yeah, it was a pretty good sized rock, and maybe somewhere between a softball and a volleyball sized type rock. And we all, at that point, we weren't really even scared at that point. It was just like, we froze because it was just so unnatural, and we're in the middle of virgin wilderness, no roads, no people, way up, almost 9 miles at this point up, 8.5 miles I would say, and so we all just kind of froze. Time froze for a second, and then all of a sudden another rock came. It landed very close to the first one, and then we just panicked. Your mind goes really fast and starts deducting, what could be putting rocks up here. And so we scampered around very quickly, and we're starting to pick up our gear, and another rock came to the left and hit the ground, and now we're getting scared. And the light is fading. It's later in the afternoon, and we started picking our stuff up. We actually didn't even take time to put our backpacks completely on, and a rock came to the right of us and landed. And we just started sprinting down this ridge, and it was very steep and pretty crazy. I was bringing up the rear, and at this point, like I said, panic kind of set in, and we're running down this ridge. And I remember that I had a 357 in my backpack, and not knowing what was throwing rocks at us, we just stopped. Our eyes stopped, and Mike and Jim kept going, and I dug through my backpack quickly and found my 357, and I looked up just in time, just before I turned and started going down the hill. I looked up, and that's when I saw the silhouette of a Sasquatch, probably no more than 60, 70 feet from me.
Now,
He had stepped out of the timberline and was just standing there, just kind of swaying back and forth.
Now, all you saw was a silhouette, though. You didn't actually see any detail?
No, I can't say it wasn't a fantastic. It was a really good sighting because it was standing right there in the middle where there was nothing before. But there wasn't enough daylight to make out facial features or anything like that. But it was an absolute silhouette of a Sasquatch there, and it was leaning back and forth or wobbling, swaying back and forth. made right here in my warehouse by a friend of mine, and that's what I saw. That's the silhouette exactly of what I saw, minus the features. The features, we kind of came up with, but that is the exact silhouette of what I saw.
That's quite an experience. I'm actually looking at your website right now, and I see the statue you're talking about, and wow, that's that would be very intimidating.
Well, it was very life-changing, I'll tell you, because from that day forward, I mean, that event literally changed the course of my life. That wouldn't have happened to me. Who knows what I'd be doing today, but so at that point, when I looked up and saw it, up to that point, I'd never been that scared in the wilderness before. Wilderness is a place I was always very comfortable. My dad was a hunting guide. I'd spend, growing up, you hear people say, that they grew up in the woods, and I literally did. I was in the woods all the time, either cross-country hiking or with my father packing out elk quarters, whatever.
Sure.
And that was the first time that I'd ever been that scared in the woods. And as a matter of fact, so freaked out that I forgot I was holding a gun at that point. And I just turned and ran down the hill and caught up with my friends on the bottom. We threw our backpacks on, hit our lamps, and started running down the trail, down the Skokomish River, back towards the trailhead, which, was still 8 miles away. We weren't going to go that far.
Right.
But we wanted out of there. And as we were running down the trail, we could hear something up in the woods beside us as if it was pacing us. And it was very frightening. Very, very frightening.
So it was running parallel to you in the woods. As you were running, it was parallel running in the woods, but deep enough you couldn't see it.
It certainly seemed to be, yes.
Right.
And because we were hearing crashing, and when we'd stop, we'd hear something come to a stop. And the thing that was pretty amazing about that was the fact that we had illumination, and we're running down a trail, and whatever this thing was, if indeed it was following us like it seemed to be, it was keeping up with us, and it was going through dark woods on a ridge side, a fairly steep ridge, and so that made it even spookier.
Sure.
Knowing that it could, stay with us, and the three of us, I was 20 years old, this was 1985, and I was in top shape. I could run 15 miles shape.
Right.
And so were my friends, and we wasted no time, and we actually ran about a mile and a half back, and there's a place on the map called Camp Pleasant, and it's more or less just kind of a wide spot in the trail, and a marker on a trail map. It's a place to camp or to backpack up to spend the night or whatever. We got to that spot, and right about the same time that 3 other hikers were coming up from the bottom of the trailhead, and we kind of met them right there at the same time. And of course, we're out of breath. I have a gun in my hand, and we tried to settle ourselves down and explain to these people what was going on. And as we were doing that, things started kind of hitting the ground around that camp.
Wow.
And there could have been a little wind. I can't swear up and down that Sasquatch followed us all the way there, but it sure seemed to have done that. And so it was a very freaky experience. I internalized what I saw for better than 10 years. But I did go into Bigfoot research literally that week.
Sure.
And about, I can't remember the exact time frames, but not too long after that, my girlfriend at the time and I hiked back up because it was just eating on me. And we had got up there, and you have to fill out a trail permit when you hit the trail with the ranger station. Mm-hmm. And that will tell you right there if the ranger's there. They'll let you know if anybody's up on the trail in front of you. And so we checked in with the ranger, and he let us borrow a couple pairs of snowshoes because the first snow was in the high country coming in. And we had actually hiked back up. This was just a few weeks later, and we hiked back up. And when we got to that same spot is when I found my first set of tracks. They were 16 and a half inches long in the snow, and they were pretty incredible, coming off the ridge, going down to the river and back up. And since that day, I've never turned back. And I just,
sure. So you
got me, and I've never been able to put it down.
So you found an entire trackway going quite a distance then, correct?
Yeah, well, yes. Yeah, now the snow up there was a little bit patchy, and I wasn't really in a position where I wanted to try to follow it. This was all very, very new to me.
Sure.
My girlfriend was walking in front of me and stepped in the first one, and she goes, "That one had toes," and I kind of ran up and looked at it, and then we noticed a couple more heading down to the river, and it kind of just put the concrete over the top for me, and erased any self doubt or any gray area I had in my life at that time, and I dove into research at first.
And obviously you've had some experiences of your own, but can you tell me about one that really stands out? Besides that one, I mean, that's a great story, and I'm sure myself and everybody listening to this will enjoy hearing that. But can you tell me one story that really stands out in your head that you've had?
That I've had, or the witnesses that I've worked with have had?
Yeah, that you've had. Something that you've experienced yourself. Besides that.
Yes, probably the most scared I've ever been. Believe it or not, there was a time when I even got more freaked out than that. In 1995, I started working with Dr. Meldrum. He had came to my office in Belfair, Washington, and basically came in and introduced himself, and we talked, and he invited me to join the North American Ape Project.
Awesome.
And so he hooked me up with a cardboard box full of gear, some night vision and game cameras, and we were off to the races. At that point, I had been, doing solo investigations for years, 10 years up to that point. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, he came in, introduced himself, and recruited me into the North American Ape Project. And how that worked is he would start, anytime there was a sighting that hit his desk, I was kind of like he'd call me and say, okay, here's a good sighting, this guy found tracks, here's his contact information, and I would leave. And I would go do it. And luckily I had a business in place, and I still do, to where I could have a staff in place to where I could still make money and be gone. So it allowed me to actually started my primary business so I could be able to make money while I was out of town.
Sure.
Because I was out of town for so much for 10 years chasing sightings and whatnot. So in one of these particular areas, he was doing a lot of research in the Blue Mountains at this time. And so I had took a big, affinity towards the Blue Mountains and studied maps and talked to people, and I had a chance to go down and sit with Grover Krantz and pick his brain a little bit. And on this trip, I went down and got with Grover, and I said, hey, is there anything, if you had time on your hands and you could go away for a couple weeks, where would you go? Where do you think your best chances of going would be? And so he had given me some information. Actually, he had said McCall, Idaho at the time, but that really wasn't in my reach at the moment. So I chose the Blue Mountains where I was doing my current investigations, and he suggested to me at that time, he goes, you ought to try a baby crying tape. And I said, a baby crying tape? He goes, yeah, if you can get a baby and put it on a loop tape, where you could broadcast it through the forest and get somewhere and be quiet where they're at and see if it works.
Sure.
And I was just fascinated with that idea. It's like, well, I just happen to have a baby at home. So went home, and my wife's looking at me funny, but I started recording one of my sons and recorded him when he was having a tantrum, and I made a loop tape. Long story short, I ended up in the Blue Mountains on a solo backpack trip with this loop tape and a little recorder and some of my gear that I had from Jeff Meldrum. And so I hiked down in this area in the Wenatchee Wilderness, a very, very remote area. And with this plan, I was going to do this baby crying tape. And so I hiked for about 6 or 7 hours in, got down to this valley, and there was a small creek in the bottom of the valley with a brush line on either side. And the side of the ridges were really well defined, and I figured, boy, this would be a great place acoustically to turn this thing on and to sit.
Sure.
Not really thinking, being a real smart guy, not really thinking what could happen. I look back on this, and I feel like a complete idiot for putting myself in this position, but I did it anyways. So I got down to the bottom of this ravine and worked back up the ravine about 20, 30, 40 yards and got my back up against a tree, and it was almost dark. I'd been hiking all day. Decided I'd spend the night there. And so it got late, and probably about 9 or 10 o'clock, I turned this tape on. And I can tell you, it was very surreal. Being in that environment, that far out, and hearing my son cry, and it echoing through this canyon. Yeah. And believe it or not, after a couple hours, I had to change batteries once. After a couple hours, I was actually getting tired and almost ready to turn it off, and then I heard a crash. And if you can imagine me sitting on one ridge with my back up against a tree, and then about 50 yards in front of me or so, brush line that was about 7 or 8 feet tall, I guess, and a small creek in the brush line, and then another ridge going straight up. So acoustically it was perfect, but I heard something crashing on the opposite ridge. And first I thought, okay, well, there's a lot of elk up here, there's bears and everything else. And then the crashing started becoming more consistent, and then it got very apparent that it was advancing towards my position. And that's when things really got interesting. I actually had my gun, same gun, as a matter of fact, and I had a Sony night shot camera and a night vision monocular screwed on the end of it, Gen 3 that I got from Jeff. And here I am sitting there ready to record whatever happens. And
Right.
And it's getting closer, and then it's becoming very apparent that it's on two legs. And instead of just, a muffled crash, and at that point, I just started getting really scared.
I can imagine, yeah.
I felt very small, very insignificant, and this thing's getting closer and closer. And I absolutely, I hate to admit this, but it's the truth, this thing got almost to the river, and I lost my nerve, and I shut the tape off. And this thing came to a grinding halt, and all I could hear was breathing. And it was very loud, very raspy, and I could tell that it was out of breath. And I was terrified.
Sure.
Absolutely freaked out. And it's pitch dark. I can't see past the brush line with the night shot camera. And I'm just sitting there, basically, actually at that point, honestly, I was hoping it didn't come any closer.
Of course.
I was freaked out. And I sat there, and its breathing finally died down. And believe it or not, after about an hour, I never heard it walk away. But after about an hour, I actually fell asleep. I'd driven a long ways, and then I'd hiked all day, and I just physically couldn't stay awake anymore.
Sure.
And so fell asleep, woke up, and birds were out, sun was out, and it was a beautiful day, and the fear was gone. I firmly felt, even though I never heard it walk away, I could just kind of feel that there was nothing there, and I poked my head through the brush line, and I found tracks right on the other side where it came to a stop.
Wow.
And I photographed the tracks, and I would often, think about what would happen if I left the tape recorder going. And then I just felt like a complete idiot. Who knows what would have happened if the thing would have popped through the brush, So that's one that really sticks out in my mind. That's the one that probably scared the crap out of me worse than anything else.
Well, I can feel your pain there. And, personally, I don't think it would be so far-fetched for someone who, you mentioned you'd been in the field for 10 years by this point. But, I guess you didn't have any other experiences in that 10 years?
No, I did, actually, but not like that.
Right.
Not to where I was that vulnerable. Going that far out, basically, and not having anybody with me and not having a better plan in place, it was exercise in stupidity.
I mean, but it doesn't seem odd to me that somebody would, get scared, and rightfully so, and turn the recording off so that you could hope that it just kind of gets bored and walks the other way.
Sure, and I spend a lot of time in the woods, more than most. Mm-hmm. And it does, I ran into cougars, I've confronted bears, and, it honestly takes a lot to get me scared in the woods. I actually feel a lot more comfortable in the middle of nowhere than I do downtown Seattle.
Right.
It's just, I think you're a lot safer in the wilderness than you are on a city street, to be honest. But it was just, the accumulation of the bipedal footfalls and raspy breathing, and there was no doubt of what it was.
Sure.
Absolutely no doubt. And then especially finding tracks too. It would take a special kind of person to sit there and just let things unfold. But at that point in time, I wasn't that person.
Right.
Today, first of all, I wouldn't put myself in that dumb of a situation today,
right.
But I would be a hell of a lot more prepared.
Absolutely. Well, and you learn, you learn from those type of mistakes and putting yourself in that situation. And obviously, I've seen some of the footage that you've collected yourself, and you've obviously learned and done much better.
Right.
Now, me personally, I've never, I'm not one of the lucky ones who has ever had the opportunity to see one myself. So, what do you think it is about that keeps people like myself so interested in this subject?
Well, I think it's in your body chemistry. I mean, people love a mystery. People love the unknown, and that's why so many of these reality shows and mystery shows and everything are so darn popular, is because people love a mystery. People love the unknown. There's so much now in the technological age where we've figured so many things out, and we're so capable of doing all these different things technologically, that when you take something as rudimentary and as primal as, say, is there a Bigfoot or is there a Loch Ness Monster, it plays into people's psyche because it's a true mystery.
Sure.
And people, it's funny. It's almost like, why are there so many musicians in the Bigfoot world? Musicians, historically have very open minds. And I think if you have an open mind and you expand your mind, or if you let your mind be expanded at all, this will appeal to you. And I just think that
Sure. Well, I agree 100%. You mentioned some of the shows that are going on right now. What was your take on, like Finding Bigfoot or the $10 million Bigfoot bounty? What's your take on those shows?
Well, it's interesting. I actually flew down and I screen tested for Finding Bigfoot when Cliff and Bobo and Matt and everybody was I was part of the BFRO at that time.
Right.
And flew down to LA and did screen tests for Finding Bigfoot. And as a matter of fact, if Cliff wasn't going to be available because of his teaching schedule, then I was the next person. That being said, once I had seen the first episode, I would quit. I have Cliff's one of my best friends in the world.
Cliff is a great
friend of mine as well. But one thing about me, I've done a bit of documentary work, and there's more coming this summer. But I don't mind doing camera work and working with documentaries, but it has to be true to my craft. It has to be real science, and it has to be a representation of what we actually do.
Absolutely.
And in all honesty, real Bigfoot research is not made for TV. It's tedious. It's painstaking. It's time consuming, and it's not made for TV. There's just a lot of documentation and everything else. The shows, though, the thing about the shows that are cool is they do raise awareness.
Yes.
Finding Bigfoot did raise awareness. I tuned in and I watched every episode. I'm not going to knock it at all. I would not have associated myself being involved in that series because that goes against the way I look at this subject.
Sure.
It's still, though, I think it was cool. I loved watching my friends on TV every week. Bigfoot bounty, same thing. Obviously that wasn't the most scientific approach at all, but there are things about it that were appealing, and I tried to watch every episode of that as well. Michael Merchant's a friend of mine, Justin Smith is a friend of mine, Rick is a friend of mine. I know some of these people, and it's fun watching your friends on TV.
Sure.
With that particular show, it was frustrating for me. Michael Merchant, love him or hate him, that is one qualified man to be in the wilderness.
I actually go ahead.
He's hands down. He was hands down, in my opinion, the most qualified one to be there.
Yeah.
Maybe not with a giant Sasquatch background, but from a field biologist standpoint and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. Justin Smith is a very good hunter, actually. Yes. I know that for a fact. Stacy Brown, no comment. Some of these other people, it's just, but it's fun. It's fun to watch that stuff.
Right.
Me personally, the TV work that I've done, and the TV work, with the exception of the Bob Saget documentary, but the TV work, the other documentary work that I've done and currently doing, and I'm going to be doing more of this summer, has got a much more serious approach, and that's the kind of stuff that I like. Right.
Actually, my last guest with my little show here was Michael Merchant, as a matter of fact, and I actually like him a lot. Very abrasive, but he tells it as it is, and you got to respect that.
Well, the thing about him is he spent a lot of time in country. I mean, the man is paid his dues in the field, and people that don't know him or know anything about him are quick to throw him under the bus because he is abrasive and he does say it like he feels it. But I have a lot of respect for his skill set because he has a very large skill set.
Yes.
And I have invited him out, and he'll be coming out hopefully this summer to do some field work with me up here in the Olympics.
Well, that would be awesome. Hopefully you'll keep us all updated on that.
Yeah, you bet.
Now, we talked about the shows, and you mentioned it raises the awareness of the Bigfoot subject. What advice would you give for somebody who's new, who wants to go out but has never been out? What advice would you give them?
Go on an expedition with the Olympic Project.
That's on my list of things to talk about. So I'm glad you brought that up too. So so your expeditions that you have, we might as well just go ahead and segue right into that. What exactly
is?
I
know that was like a selfless plug, but the fact of the matter is, what we do, if we're going to describe what we're doing up there on those expeditions in a nutshell, and this sounds maybe a little arrogant, I don't mean it to sound that way, but what we do is we take researchers and enthusiasts, and we will give you the tools and try to give you the skill set to be a better, more effective researcher or enthusiast. One of the things that we do at the Olympic Project, one of the things we pride ourselves with, is our exhaustive, thorough documentation. And in my opinion, the biggest hole in Bigfoot research is documentation. Bigfoot research is filled with stories and encounters and hearsay and this, that, and the other thing, where there's a gigantic void, there's a giant lack of, and there is some, but there is a very big lack of documentation. And that's one of the reasons that this particular subject hasn't advanced as far as it could have by now, is because with a lot of the things that have happened, the proper documentation has not been done. And so what we do with these expeditions, I won't make this for a long answer, but what we do is, like, for instance, on an expedition, we give 7 classes during the expedition. And those classes include, let me back up just for a second.
Sure.
One of the things, I am a wilderness guide as well as being a Bigfoot researcher. I take people on guided hikes, and I teach wilderness survival and things like that. You can't go out as a researcher and do effective research if you're not prepared to be in the forest.
Agreed.
Hands down. And so one of the things, if you're going to go out and you're going to try to spend a weekend or a week out in the field researching, you don't want to worry about where your truck's at. You don't want to have to worry about, am I going to get wet? You don't want to have to worry about, am I going to get lost, cold, starve, all those different things. So we kind of start at square one, and we try to help prepare people to be in the woods. So with the classes that we give, I teach wilderness survival. Me and my partner James Millian. We teach facing predators. We teach DNA forensic sample gathering the proper way. We teach track casting. We do some tracking. Basically, there's quite a few classes that we do teach during the expedition where we sit everybody around. And then last but not least, we teach proper evidence documentation. We hand out an 8-page documentation packet, because if you're a researcher, a new researcher, to get back to your original question, if you're a new researcher and you're out and you find a Bigfoot track, what do you do with it? What exactly do you do with it?
Very good question.
And so, there's a lot of things you do to it. First of all, you document your site. Okay, where are you at? What elevation are you at? What time of year is it? What's the moon pattern? What's the wind doing? Is it raining? Is it sunny? What other animals are in the area? You document everything you can about that spot right there. And then you do a series of photographs, video if you have it, some commentary, and you document every particular thing you can think of around that track. And so by the time you're done, that one track has its own file. Okay? Here's everything I know about this track. Okay? And then we also teach you how to cast it, how to preserve it. Okay? And the reason that we're so anal about that is because when you take a core area, like say one of our core areas that we're working in, if you document every track that you find in that core area over a 3 to 5 year period, every hair sample you find, every vocalization you record, every encounter that you or somebody you're with has, you document all those things deeply. Then in a little bit, you start to see a pattern. And once you have a pattern, then you can start establishing predictability.
Sure.
And it's predictability and developing patterns is the same way that Jane Goodall was able to study the gorillas and Diane Fossey. They developed patterns. They made themselves predictable, and then they developed patterns throughout their documentation. And it gives you a whole bunch of tools to try to figure out, okay, well, we know that in April, we know that there's going to be Sasquatches or Bigfoot down in where the elk are camping in these different river basins. Why do we know that? Because we documented 5 different tracks in this one basin, this one particular time of year. And you see where I'm going with this?
Yes, sure.
It's all about establishing patterns.
Absolutely.
And so these are the things that we're putting a ton of emphasis on our expeditions, as well as a lot of hiking, on and off trail tracking, a lot of fun, presentations by Dr. Meldrum. Barackman is generally there. It's just a heck of an experience.
Sure. I mean, you make 2 really good points. One, you mentioned what you should do when you're there, and 2, you mentioned how to get the information to do that, and that is by, taking some classes, whether it's with you or anybody else, take some classes with someone who's out there and kind of get an idea of what you're doing in the field before you even get there. I think that's some great advice. Now, you did some name dropping, and I'll tell you, Dr. Meldrum is probably my hero. I've only had a chance to chat with him once online, but look forward to meeting him in June. But I saw on your website that he's actually going to be at one of your expeditions in March, I believe?
Yeah, actually, thus far, he's been at every expedition we've done.
Oh.
He is, I think that's right. There might have been one last year he wasn't at, but I think he's been to every one. Jeff and I still have a working relationship, and we're also very good friends. He is also, in this field, he is my hero. You can imagine what it was like for me when he walked in 1995.
Yeah.
It blew me away. He was my rock star.
Sure.
So yeah, I have tons and tons of respect for him and what he's done and the sacrifices he's made along the way, because they've been many.
Sure.
And then Cliff is, like I said, Cliff's, you got your hand and the 5 people in your life that are your best friends. Cliff's one of those fingers. Cliff is a very dear friend of mine, and usually comes on the expeditions just to be there.
Sure.
And so yeah, it ends up being a lot of fun, because a lot of the attendees can not only go out and hike, with Jeff Meldrum and pick his brain, but they can sit and have a cocktail with Cliff at evening or whatever, around the fire or whatever. So it's kind of a blend between a research expedition, a learning experience, and a retreat. Sure.
Well, so since we talked about the expeditions that you offer, why don't you go ahead and plug it a little bit? I mean, do you charge for that? Do you have any other dates coming up? Kind of give a little more information about that. Maybe our listeners may be interested.
Sure. Yes, we absolutely do charge for it. It's $400 per person, and we never have more than 20 attendees on each trip. Now, when you think about it, I know it's a little more expensive than a couple of your comparable expeditions, but there is absolutely no comparison.
Sure.
From what you will gather from this expedition to probably almost any other expedition you've been on. We put a lot of information down the pike on these expeditions, and not only that, it's very, very hands-on. And we're in field. It's a really good experience. We have a facility that we have to maintain. And the cool thing is our base camp, our research property, is located squarely in the middle of my core main research area. So we literally camp there, stay there. We have bathroom, we have shower, we have the Bigfoot bar where most of the top researchers in the world would find this bar. We have an indoor area with a wood stove, seating area, presentation area, dry camping or wet camping, and cook stations, the whole 9 yards. So, people ask, what do we charge? How do we charge on these expeditions, or why do we charge? Well, we charge basically because research costs money.
Absolutely.
Thermal imagery gear costs money. Game cameras cost money. Everything about it costs money. And believe it or not, all the expeditions we did last year, my profits for the year, I do this with a partner in my guide service, but my profits bought me a riding lawnmower so I can mow our research property. And that's really it. Other than, paying expenses, food and whatnot for the expedition. So, yeah, we do charge for them, but I have not had one person at this point come up and say, boy, that wasn't worth it.
Right.
I mean, everybody that's come, there's been 3 different expedition members who are now members of the Olympic Project.
Awesome.
They loved it so much that have come back, and they're involved in that aspect as well. But yeah, they're just really good trips. I can't say enough about them. You have to experience one.
I think I may in the future. So as far as like the Olympic project as a whole, I mean, what are you up to now? What are you working on right now?
Well, right now we try not to overextend ourselves, basically, because there's not that many of us, and we all have lives and day jobs.
Sure.
So I am in continuous research in my core area, which is up at the property. It is a travel thoroughfare for Sasquatch, and I rarely ever say anything definitively, because there's not a lot of things that you can definitively say in Sasquatch research, but I can definitively say this. The area that our research property is on is a travel corridor for them. And so I am still doing field studies up there any chance I get up there. I was up there last weekend. I will be up there weekend before last. I will be up there again next weekend. The other thing that we're working on right now is a habituation site with Sarah Brown, and that's where the brown thermal came from. And so we're deep in that. But the thing is, we're doing this one differently than we've ever done one. We are pretty much hands off, and the people that own the property are the ones doing the footwork. We are there in a support role with equipment, and we do go there, but we're not out canvassing the area with cameras. We're not out hiking through there every day. They're having ongoing activity. We have already got more audio from this site in the last 6 months than even exists in Bigfoot world. A lot of great audio, incredible audio, and plus the thermal video and the still shots are pretty compelling. We've done extensive documentation on that thermal, and so we're working that. That's probably the main thing we're doing right now with ongoing habitat study up in my core area.
You're referring to the thermal of the Sasquatch that's looks to me anyway like it's in like a little bit of a gully.
Exactly. Yeah, you're looking at it from
No problem.
I'm in my office here. I apologize.
No problem.
I've done, myself and my wife, Tori, and other Olympic Project members have documented the crap out of that place. And the particular position where it was standing, tracks were found in conjunction with the video and the still shot. It's been quite a journey, and we are actively researching them now. The homeowners are firming on a very regular basis.
Good.
And we're set up really well out there right now. As a matter of fact, better than we were when the initial thermal was got. Also, the handheld FLIR Scout that was used in that video and that still has gone back to FLIR. There were problems with it. It is fixed and it's back in working right now.
Good.
So that's the main thing outside thing that we're working on right now.
Sure. I think that unfortunately mainstream science anyway, has kind of had the opinion, that this thing isn't real. All right. And for the most part, I think they've decided to be, to kind of skip out on it a little bit and not take it seriously and not even do any research themselves. But, do you think that science should at least look at what the available circumstantial evidence is and maybe go looking for it for themselves?
I don't blame science at all because there hasn't been anything compelling enough to get science's attention yet. Science is there. It's a great tool, and there are probably many people willing to look into it as soon as proper evidence is put forth.
Sure, and I agree.
Evidence has to be put forth.
And I agree that there's not any I agree that I don't blame science either, but I mean as a whole there is an awful lot of circumstantial evidence, and it would I guess personally I would think that science would be a little more interested in an unknown species than what they seem to be. So I was just kind of curious what your opinion on that was.
Yeah, and I think that once enough evidence is put forth, and not just evidence, not just circumstantial evidence, but empirical evidence, once enough is put forth, then I think they will take notice. And that's actually one of our mandates is we're not going to science with a notebook full of experiences and encounters.
Sure.
We're going to go to science with a notebook full of documentation and habitat study. That's what we're doing, and then we're trying for the best evidence we can as well, with audio and thermal and everything else. I do believe science, once enough good evidence is put forward, I think science will get on board. But if people, I hear this a lot about people, upset that science hasn't got involved. Well, we have to give them a reason to get involved. We have to give them a great reason to get involved, because if it's not a great reason, they're not going to get involved.
That's a great point. It's a great point. Short of a body, what do you think it's going to take to change their minds and get them in?
I think if the way we're set up right now, and I'm not just talking about us, but there's a lot of people doing thermal imaging around the United States, but if I'll put it this way, if one walks back through the area where we got the initial video, it will be amazing, because the way we are set up out there now, it can't be anything but amazing. We are ready. We're ready out there, and it's what it's going to take. It's going to take some footage that is completely definitive. And I think that we are actually poised in a place where we can get that footage. I think there's at least a decent possibility we're going to get it at this particular place, and maybe at another place or two. And I think that's what it's going to take. It's going to be something that you can do size reference. If one walks back through the area that we're in right now, and if it walks by one of our fixed points, you'll be able to see high depth musculature and be able to do size comparisons with humans, things like that haven't been done yet.
Right.
I think that would get the attention of a lot more scientists and biologists and get them on board.
Good deal. At some point, the subject has kind of become taboo to talk about. All right. Do you think that had it not become taboo to discuss Bigfoot, do you think that we would be a lot further in our research than we are now?
No. To go back to my initial point, I think that the reason that I think it's just all because of what's been presented so far. The Patterson-Gimlin film is amazing, but it can't be proven one way or another.
Right.
Even though Bob Gimlin's a very good friend of mine, and I would put heavy money down that is a real film, for sure. But we need more, and it needs to be not just, you can't go to a scientist with a story.
Sure.
They can't chew on that. You just got to take them things they can chew on.
Good. one idea that I've heard that I think might be a good idea, and I kind of want to get your opinion on this as well, is a database that all researchers can use, and they can also put information into, like a mainframe database, if you will. What do you think about something like that?
I think that's a great idea. I think it's a fantastic idea. It needs to be done, but then somebody needs to step up and do it. Somebody needs to put the time. The one thing that we are doing right now, we're trying to put together, again, all of us do have families and big jobs in their lives, so it is tough. You have to kind of fit Bigfoot in. But one of the things that I had an idea a few months ago before the Sasquatch Summit, and I've reached out to a few different people. Mm-hmm. One of the problems is when somebody gets evidence, I get calls and emails and texts and everything all month long by people that want their evidence looked at.
Sure.
Whether it's a hair sample or a track or whatever. And so what we're trying to do as fast as we can is put together an entity. And I've already approached Dr. Meldrum. I've approached Barackman, Barackman from a thermal aspect, Kurt Brandenburg, some different people that as a body that you can submit things to, and then we will put it through. Because in the past, people have sent me, say, hair samples. Well, I'll forward them on to Meldrum because they know him.
Sure.
And then sometimes he'll forward them on to somebody who gets some DNA done or this, that, or a hair specialist or whatever. So what we're trying to do, my idea was to get an organization together to where anybody can take any type of evidence and submit it, and then we can run it through a process. Mm-hmm. Tracks, Cliff Barackman, field work myself, so on and so forth.
Sure.
And then try to come up with a conclusion for that person. Because the biggest problem, with Sasquatch, even with a lot of these shows, I was just having this discussion with a producer from On the Fence Productions 2 days ago about this. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest problems with Sasquatch television, or just people putting their stuff in, is there's rarely a conclusion. Even if the conclusion's wrong, you have to try for a conclusion. So there's an ending point. The piece of hair, follow it all the way to the end until you get the DNA. If it's a picture, research every available resource you have until you can come up with what it is.
Right.
And so it's a little bit off your question, but we're trying to put together that type of a thing to where we can take information and then run it through the scientific process as best we can, and then come up with an actual result.
I think my only concern about that would be the amount of information you would get. There's so many people, especially newer people going in because of the shows we talked about earlier, that are, I think you would get inundated with so much information that it'd be hard to pick good from bad,
You would, and that's the hard part is finding the time to do it.
Sure.
I get very overextended. Anybody who knows me that's listening to this will laugh because they know, I have a primary business, which is landscape excavation, and then I also have a guide service, and we do these expeditions, do research. I have 5 children, and way too many hobbies. And so and I'm just, one person out of this group that I just mentioned. Everybody has lives. It's tough to, what it's going to take is somebody to stand up and finance an effort like this.
Absolutely.
To where people can devote time, 40 hours a week, to doing something like this. At this point, nobody's there.
Sure.
We're blessed having Wally. Wally does buy our electronics as we ask for them, and that is fantastic. But none of us get paid to do this.
Right.
So it's you can only just when you have a family and a life and a career. It's really hard. It's very demanding to try to put all this stuff together. Ideas are great, but putting them into action in the real world is really tough because there isn't any funding available right now for Sasquatch research, on a major scale.
Absolutely.
And that's the other thing that you're saying. What's it going to take? It's going to take some entrepreneur, some philanthropist to step up and say, "Hey, I'm going to throw a couple $1 million at this and see how far we can get."
Absolutely.
To this date, that person hasn't really stepped up. And if you do, just please give them my Facebook page and my address and my phone number.
Yeah. So if there's any millionaires listening right now, please feel free to contact Mr.
For your
Randles.
local researcher, for sure.
Absolutely. I think I have one more concern about the database, and I want your opinion on this as well. If you take, unfortunately, we have some not so credible people in the Bigfoot community, and by creating a database with so much information, would you be at all concerned about somebody creating a hoax that would be based on that information and making it even harder to tell the good from the bad?
happens, you know. And so yeah, I mean, hoaxing is very tough. And the only good thing about that is the hoaxing. You can learn as much from a hoax as you can from an experience to not get duped the next time. You know, I've been fooled before, and everybody I know that's serious about this has been fooled before.
I got fooled last night, so it's all right.
That's a real concern. That's a real concern. And the best way to do it, you know, to get good stuff is to just try to keep it, you know. I hate saying putting it on the down low, but it's once you, I don't know, it's a whole other subject. But yeah, that's a real concern. That's a real concern for a big, you know, a big database that's gonna do what you're saying. You know, I think it's a great idea, but it's gonna take time and money and somebody that's willing to make the commitment.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's a fantastic idea. I wish it was there.
And I think it will be. I think it will be. I mean, even technology you mentioned earlier, what can, you know, how good technology is and what it's doing now, it's also getting less expensive as well. So, you know, I do think it's coming.
Oh, I think you're right. You know, it's probably not as expensive as I'm making it sound, but it's just going to take somebody who's going to make the commitment and stay with it.
Sure.
You know, I'm not a big fan of Matt Moneymaker, but he does have a heck of a good citing and database.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm with you 100% on that. I do love their website, and they've brought in a lot of good information.
Yes.
On the topic of hoaxes, and I wouldn't be doing my job, Randall or Mr. Randles, if I didn't bring this up. But what do you think about Hank?
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, I figured you did. I just had to throw that in.
Well, I'll just tell you honestly, I do not have an opinion. I don't have an opinion because I haven't seen Hank. And even if I did see Hank, I still wouldn't have an opinion because I'm not qualified to look at that thing and say if it's real or it's not real. When it comes to, you know, I'm not going to sit here and judge or even comment on Rick Dyer's character.
Sure.
You know, I'll comment on it. Yeah, he's very abrasive, he's very offensive, and he's pissed a lot of people off.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't mean that there's no possibility that it's real.
Right.
You know, I don't know, man. I really don't know. I know that everybody. See, one thing I won't do in the research world is draw lines in the sand.
Absolutely.
I don't do that now. He's done some things and said some things about some very good friends of mine, and even he came after me at one point. We got that cleared up. But you know, crazy things happen to people that you would never expect. Who knows?
Right.
But I won't even venture a guess. I have been invited, and I'm invited at this moment to come see Hank anytime I want. Mm-hmm. And he's also told me that if I do, that he would try to let me see some more of the evidence, and that's fine. But honestly, he was even in Seattle, here near where I'm at, but they had a family obligation. I couldn't go see it.
Right.
Would I go see it if I had the chance? Probably. And I'm not going to get excited about it or even have any kind of an opinion. I would like to see, and I told Rick this, you know, I would like to see the DNA reports, medical reports, and everything else. Mm-hmm. I have seen, you know, a couple things that other people have not seen that he's made me privy to. One item in particular is pretty impressive. But again, I'm not qualified to say it's real or it's not real. At that point, science needs to take its course. And then, you know, if he can back it up, he can back it up. If he can't, he can't.
Right, absolutely.
And so, in all honesty, you know, that's, you know, he's pretty nice to me. I do talk to him, not often, but once in a while.
Sure.
And, you know, I kind of leave it at that. And I just leave it at that. I've had several people in the Bigfoot community attack me privately, because I even, you know, I've talked to the guy or have dialogue. Well, I've actually known him for quite a while.
Right.
And I treat people as they treat me.
Absolutely.
And he's always been very respectful with me. And quite honestly, the times that I've talked to him at length, it hasn't even been about Bigfoot.
Right.
You know, just life and this, that, and the other thing.
Good.
But as far as Hank is concerned, I just, honest to God, I know it sounds like a pussy way out, but I don't have an opinion.
Well, I mean, yeah, and I think it's good that you look at it that way. And, you know, as you mentioned earlier about, you know, some of the things he's done, you know, like when he urinated on Dr. Meldrum's book, you know, that I found that pretty offensive, you know.
Sure.
But
now he did come out a couple weeks ago and made a video and apologized. He said he felt like an asshole, and I was pretty sure he was going to do that because realize that he crossed the line there.
Yeah.
And
well, good for him.
People can take it for what it's worth, but at least he was man enough to step up and say he was sorry.
Absolutely.
He did it publicly.
I haven't seen that video. I didn't know that video existed yet, but it's good that he did. I give him props for that.
Yeah, if I find it, I'll send you a link to it.
Sure. Well, Mr. Randles, I'll tell you, I've taken up about an hour of your time today, and I appreciate so much you sitting down with me today and talking. Traditionally, what I like to do is I like to close out the interview with any final thoughts you might have. It can be on any subject, anything you want. The sky's the limit. It's all yours.
Well, I would just, any researchers that are out there that are listening to this, you don't have to come to one of my expeditions to be a better researcher. Just, I would say if there was just kind of a message I could send out, it would be to try to take these encounters, the things that are happening. Your post on Facebook, I saw one. Are you still there?
Yeah.
I heard a click. Sorry.
No.
Take these encounters that you're all having and just get into documentation. Because if we're ever going to learn more about this species, this very real species, it needs more documentation. And that's again, in my opinion, I'm like a documentation whore. It's very needed in this field, and we can all collectively learn more through more documentation. So I guess I'll leave you with that. I would like to see more people getting more serious about proper documentation and record keeping.
Great. Thank you, sir.